This is the Pennyworth podcast on TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Season 2, Episode 7, The Bloody Mary.
A brand new weapon of mass destruction is likely going to be used on civilians. That's not America's business?
No.
Can we at least brief Prime Minister Aziz on the situation? The League have no idea what they're facing. The people of London...
No, absolutely not. The League leadership and the London public will find out about storm clouds soon enough. It's not our job to inform them. The U.S. government doesn't officially know about storm cloud, and we don't need to know. We need deniability.
But you do know.
I'll deny that.
Ma'am, surely now is the time for the U.S. government to intervene forcefully, to forbid the use of storm cloud under international laws.
If storm cloud is used, it'll end the war pretty damn quick, right?
Well, yes, I guess it would.
Well, your president thinks ending wars quickly is good.
My God. You sons of bitches want them to use Stormcloud?
Dr. Fox, you've been through a harrowing experience. Emotional feelings are only to be expected. You'll both be on the embassy flight tomorrow without fail. Now, until then, you speak to no one. Silence. Clear?
Clear, Chief. Very clear.
Wait a minute. You cut me off. I had so much more to say to her.
That is precisely why I cut you off. I was doing you a favor.
Welcome back, governors. We're back with Pennyworth, Season 2, Episode 7, The Bloody Mary on TV Podcast Industries. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow governors and Gothamites. I am one of your other hosts, John. Fancy a morning drink?
Yeah, Bloody Mary. Possibly a reference to the hangover cure that sorts everybody out from the night before. maybe. My other reference for it was Bloody Mary used to be what Queen Mary I of England was called.
Yes.
And she's the one that tried to reverse the English Reformation, which is kind of what's going on with the Raven League trying to take over everywhere in England and trying to overthrow the throne, basically, because the Queen is a member of the English League. So potentially that's the reference.
It could be.
Or
yeah,
it
that's
could
the
be
other
just,
one. Yeah.
You know, in the cold light of morning, you regret your decisions of maybe moving to America.
Yes, exactly.
Maybe it's a little bit of that. Yes, we're going to talk spoiler-filled all about Season 2, Episode 7 of Pennyworth. Still not sure if this is the penultimate episode of Pennyworth or not. Unfortunately, nobody's been able to confirm it for me. Still IMDb listing the show as 10 episodes in the season. We have one more episode to go for definite. And we're just not sure if there's two more after that or if this is the end. But this does feel a little bit like the penultimate episode of the series. I can see how they get another couple of episodes out of it, of course. But it does feel like a penultimate episode.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you can really see that this would wrap up the events happening in England for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, it'd be interesting. Hopefully we get another couple after episode 8. But at the moment, I guess this could be the penultimate episode of Pennyworth Season 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting that there's nothing for definite about the length of this season, so it's a little strange.
Yeah.
But it's like a big surprise parcel,
Exactly.
I guess.
Exactly. And, you know, remember, again, times of COVID, this show did shut down production for a couple of months and came back towards the end of last year to film its last few episodes. So, and they did make changes to the story. We are aware of that from some interviews with the cast. Did make changes to the story to facilitate filming in time of COVID as well. So potentially they did shorten down the series a little bit, which may explain one or two things that happened in this episode. Another piece of news. Let's kick off with a little bit of news, John. Another piece of news that may play into Pennyworth as well. Bruno Heller, the co-creator of Gotham and of Pennyworth, has been tapped to jump aboard one of the 3 announced spin-offs for Game of Thrones. He's going to be involved in Sea Snake's 9 Voyages. This is a story set in the world of Game of Thrones, a big epic story by the sounds of the description of it. But interesting because Bruno Heller had written almost every episode of season 1 and a number of episodes in season 2. We wrote last week's episode 6, of Pennyworth. So if he's going on to become showrunner or head writer on another show, something as epic as HBO's Game of Thrones world or universe, this may be an indicator that Pennyworth may be done at the end of season 2.
Yeah, it's a strong indication for sure.
Total speculation, of course. There's nothing here saying that he can't do 2 shows at the same time. He is a writer. He is able to write multiple things. He has, of course, worked for HBO before when he worked on Rome many years ago. So he has worked within their environment before, and their big shows with big budgets behind them. So, but very interesting to see what Bruno Heller would do in the world of Game of Thrones, isn't it?
Exactly. Throw Batman in there, I guess.
It'll be just the kind of prequel to Game of Thrones, effectively, how everybody got their start,
But I guess having done Rome, then there's an element there that is maybe that epic swords and sandals. Exactly. So, it'd be interesting to see, given that we've kind of gotten to know him through effectively, DC comic world, and certainly, he's known for that police or psychology procedural that he's done with at least Gotham season 1
and The Mentalist
and The Mentalist, exactly. So it'd be interesting to see how involved he is with this, and what take, if he is involved, what take he does on it. Yeah.
But there you go. That's a little bit of news within the Pennyworth world, let's say. There is another big thing that happened in DC this week as well. But we're going to talk about the episode of Pennyworth first, and then we'll talk a little bit at the end of the podcast about our thoughts on Zack Snyder's Justice League, which was released this week on HBO Max in the US, and on Sky Movies over in Europe, Sky Cinema, over in Europe as well. So we did get the chance to see it, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on. But let's get into this episode of Pennyworth, John.
Yes, let us get into our spoiler-filled review. Derek, what are some of the episode details?
Well, the episode was written by Jamie Dowdall. He wrote episode 3 of this season. That was the episode where Baza died. So quite a big episode of season 2 that Jamie wrote. Back on board for this episode. The episode was directed by Catherine Mooreshead. She's been directed TV since back in the 90s, including pretty much all of the big British shows, from soaps like Emmerdale to sci-fi with Doctor Who and Ashes to Ashes, period drama with Downton Abbey, comedy and No Offence, and the 4 Weddings and a Funeral TV series. So lots of different strings to Catherine's bow. And you kind of need that when you come on board with something like Pennyworth, which really does straddle all divides of TV shows.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent stuff.
Yeah. John, do you want to give us the synopsis for this episode?
Sure. Lord Harwood, under house arrest at his family home, works out that Salt, now the acting Chancellor of the Raven Union, was responsible for undermining him and his allies. But sympathisers in the Raven Union hook Harwood up with the Syke sisters. But surrounded by the army, Lord Harwood sacrifices himself so that Bet and Peggy Sykes can deliver vital information to Francis Gaunt. Back in London, Alfred prepares for his flight to America with his mother and Dave Boy. With vicious rumours swirling about their affair, Alfie's and Melanie Troy have a final fling. But the following day, Alfie turns down one last job for her husband, Gully Troy, who becomes increasingly suspicious and confronts his wife. After a brutal fight with his wife, she flees to Alfred, where he offers her to take her to America as well. Meanwhile, with the knowledge of Stormcloud, the US Embassy also prepares to evacuate all its personnel from London. At the airport, both Thomas Wayne and Alfred Pennyworth decide not to leave London and continue fighting, as Thomas and Lucius Fox share their information on Stormcloud with the English League.
All the storylines really coalescing as the season comes to a close here, which doesn't help us in our format of how we break out these episodes. Unfortunately, we do tend to talk about the separate storylines separately, but we will maintain it. I think we're going to kick off with Alfie, the boys in the job, which still works because once again, Alfie has been offered a job this time.
Yeah, one last job. Last job.
I love it. It must be a joke in the writer's room where they just put up on the board, one last job. What's it going to be this week? There must be some kind of joke in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see Alfie packing up at home with his mom, getting set to leave the country. You see Mrs. P trying to sell off a bit of their furniture for a £5, whereas she's being offered £3 for the bit of furniture. It seems like a steal to me.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I guess the guy's argument who's trying to barter with her is that, well, this all could be just matchwood, exactly. Given the bombardment of London by the Raven Union.
Very true.
So she's lucky to get anything for it. But I guess it's like a yard sale, as they try and prepare for the big move to America.
Everything must go. Yes. But Gully Troy comes in, as we said, just with one last job. And they're 10k jobs. These jobs are getting lots of money for Alfie if he does go for them, you know.
Well, it's a good job. The money is kind of coming Alfie's way, and he's got the luxury of saying yes or no to it, because this episode certainly Alfie is flinging money around like he's a millionaire, given he was pretty much broke. And needed to regain the money so he could get the tickets and so on. Yeah. He's certainly playing fast and loose with his money in this episode. He certainly is. But he refuses here, and Gully's wondering why. But I mean, I must say that I found Gully's suspicions a little weird here. I guess the main context for it was that, right at the start we see that Alfie and Melanie have another fling here. Behind the back of Gully Troy. So, he probably missed, and wondered where his wife had gone in that moment. It's probably slightly unlike her to do that. Yes. And he comes to Alfie, and maybe it's with the knowledge already. I mean, we know from the English League that it's knowledge to Aziz and the Queen. Yeah. So that, there are these rumors circulating. It's in having effectively consummated their affair in the Delaney Club. It's a very public place. People at least saw her coming and going, from there. So,
literally,
I guess that's where the suspicions have come in for Gully. Yeah. But it kind of feels like it just didn't have that real direct connection where he, has overheard someone saying something or saw a note or whatever, or followed her. So his suspicions just centered around Alfie not wanting to take that last job, to me just seems a little weird, because while he's going to America the next day, why would he be doing a job in 2 or 3 days' time after the preparation and planning for it? So I didn't understand why he was making a bit of a meal of it.
Because there's a flight goes every week, John. If you miss this flight, you can wait till next week. I like the kind of gag of that. Whereas nowadays, well, in regular times, you would have a flight going every day, or at least one. And here it's like, put off your plans for a week. We have another job for you. I think one of the things that's missing in Pennyworth season 2 that I was expecting a lot more of, we're all the way towards the end of the season now, and I really was expecting, with bringing in someone like Gully Troy, who's supposed to have a history with Baza and Dave Boy and Alfie, that you would have seen some kind of flashbacks to their time in the army together. It's something you didn't get much in season 2. We saw some of that in season 1.
Yeah, there was a little bit right at the start, but then, nothing further.
And I think that would have helped develop this idea that Gully knows Alfie really well. He knows when he's off with him. The two of them know each other. They've had this relationship we've seen throughout the season. And, remember early on in the season, we had Alfie standing up directly to Gully Troy, that excellent line with Gully going, "I'm Gulliver Troy, no one messes with me," and Alfie going, "I'm Alfred Pennyworth, and I just did." He is a very strong character, not willing to back down at any time, which is probably why Gully's suspicions are really ignited by Alfie kind of going, no, I'm off. I'm out of here now, kind of thing. I'm not going to do that job for you.
Yeah. And I guess there's a bit of, sort of unit loyalty to, their military grouping. So yeah, I mean, it kind of works. It kind of doesn't. It feels a little offhand that he's suddenly really being sort of, narrow-eyed and suspicious in this way. Yeah.
But it does ignite the suspicion. He doesn't, I don't think anyway, from the next scene, which we'll talk about in a second, I don't think he instantly thinks this is what's happening with Alfie. He's looking to confirm this with Melanie, because there's been some idea that something's been going on. He's now going back to his house with this idea in his head. Alfie seems a bit weird with me. You seem a bit weird with me, Melanie. Putting 2 and 2 together, he starts to push really hard with Melanie to find out whether the two of them are having a relationship. And when she confirms it, he loses it. And this is probably one of the most brutal scenes we've ever seen.
Yeah,
in Pennyworth.
absolutely.
I kept having to remind myself that that this is a stunt double that's working, that's doing the part of Melanie effectively, because she's being thrown left, right and centre across that room, smashing through tables and chairs. A really brutal scene, and something you really don't see very often.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very realistic, very violent, and very brutal. It was difficult to watch, actually, because it was very raw. But it, hats off for portraying that domestic violence and that outburst of anger in physical, violent ways from Gully. Yeah. Like, it felt very realistic. And I think sometimes that's where the jar happens, because you know that this is coming from a comic book. Yeah. And there's a lot of violence in comic books, lots of fights and so on. And this felt very grounded, very realistic. And certainly, it was a tough one to watch. But she does manage to get away. She certainly gives as good as she got from Gully. I think it's a corkscrew to the leg, arm, and then kind of shoulder. So she manages to get away and run back to Alfie.
Do you know, I was almost certain that was in his neck, and I thought that was going to be the end of Gully.
Me too.
Like, I thought they were actually going to do it this way, where it wasn't going to be the jilted lover going back after Alfie in next week's episode. I thought they were actually going to have it that Melanie got out of there and took out Gully on her way. But we do see him later on the floor mopping up his blood, alive and angry, really. So,
doing his stitches.
Exactly, stitching himself up as well. Oh, gosh. He's coming back like a villain for the show. Let's pop on over to the bar, just for a big scene, because I think this plays into Alfie's actions later on in the episode. We see the Raven Union drunken lads coming in, announcing themselves as VIPs as they join into the bar, and after a couple of drinks, start singing Rule Britannia. I kind of like this, and again, outside of the UK, if you're not from there, if you don't know the UK, I wonder how this plays. I really like the idea of the two kind of battling songs of Rule Britannia, on one side being the Raven Union's song. That's kind of
very bombastic, very nationalistic. Kind of marries very well with the kind of sort of fascist element of the Raven Union. One about superiority, all this kind of ruling the waves, all of that kind of thing. And it's contrasted with, I guess, a more kind of popular song of We'll Meet Again that comes from World War II, from Vera Lynn, and a much more kind of accommodating song, this idea of being separated during hard times, such as in wartime. And certainly with this battle between Raven Union and English League, effectively a civil war, maybe that families are on different sides of the argument of the battle, and this idea that at some point in the future we'll meet again, we'll come back together, it kind of feels much more inclusive, and we have Sandra drumming this up as a response to the Raven Union's idea of patriotism, I guess.
And I really like how it's filmed. I love seeing Sandra just slowly walk to the stage, sing quite silently in her own voice. She has got a microphone, but singing quietly in her own voice as this drunken Rule Britannia is going on, and suddenly other people in the bar start taking up voice with her for We'll Meet Again. It's a really inspirational moment as everybody joins in to this really inspirational song. And I was wondering when I watched this episode, I mentioned earlier on that there was a pause for COVID and it came back afterwards. During the summer of last year, in June of last year, the Queen made her speech about the hard times everybody was going through, and did reference We'll Meet Again as kind of an inspirational moment. It was taken as a real inspiration for everybody who'd been locked inside their doors waiting to see family and friends, and still are to this day up in March of 2021. So there was kind of an underlining of this song as being the type of inspiration that the British people needed, and that people need to get them through these hard times, like in COVID. And then when Vera Lynn, who sang the popular version of this song, passed away in June of 2020, this was really played all the time. People were singing it together as this big moment during COVID. So I do wonder whether it was included in the story of Pennyworth and the rewriting of this episode, potentially, because of all that was going on during the summer of last year, kind of reframing this as a moment in our time now, like it was during post-war, where people have been separated and couldn't return together.
Yeah.
It felt quite moving, really, to be honest, given what everyone's been going through for the last year.
Exactly. And I think you're right. It probably feeds into Alfie's, change of heart, I guess, in relation to his move to America. Yeah. We see Alfie also imagining his dad again at the bar. Yeah. Melanie comes in and he offers her to take her to America as well with his mother and Dave Boy. But when they finally get to the airport, Alfie is hesitant to go and ultimately says he doesn't want to go. He hesitates on the tarmac as he's walking to the plane. Yeah. Now his mother is absolutely relieved at this, you know, and is happy that she doesn't have to go to the land of bears and snakes that she's afraid of. I guess she might be going back to an empty house if she's sold all her furniture.
Yeah,
so,
a little bit.
you know, and, you know, there's the notion that Alfie wants to fight for his country again and their home.
Yeah.
Dave Boy also relinquishes his dreams, which part of me was thinking, I wonder if Dave Boy would go, but I guess they're a real tight group.
Yeah.
But
I kind of would have liked to see him in the final scene in the room with the English League. Because he's also chosen not to go away. Because Alfie's not going, Dave Boy's not going to go. It is that element of their friendship. Whatever Alfie says, Dave Boy follows, basically. He's mentioned him multiple times. He's not the leader. He's not the one that's going to come up with ideas. But this idea here that they're going to stay in the UK and fight for their home, Dave Boy kind of going, okay, right, I guess that's what we're doing now, takes his bags and goes off. I would have loved to have seen him in the room later on because he surely will be part of this fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
And though he's not a leader and not high up, I think he would be the equivalent of Lucius. At least, he would at least have that kind of insight and need to have the full background details. I would have liked to see that just to kind of make sense of why he's staying rather than just Dave Boy staying because he's staying and Alfie said so.
Yeah.
But Melanie does board the plane and off she goes.
Yeah. She also meets Patricia. She meets Thomas's sister.
Yeah.
Just as they queue up to go into the plane.
Yep.
So the two of them are there. There is the fond farewell of, track me down if you're ever over in America from Melanie to Alfie.
Yep.
So, this is not necessarily the end of Alfred and Melanie. I think they have a fairly casual relationship. So, and off they board the plane and it takes off.
Yeah. And as I wrote in my notes, it takes off and doesn't blow up.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely waiting for that moment of it getting into the sky and blowing up. It just instantly I was going, well, we've never heard of Melanie in comic books and never heard about this relationship at all. And Patricia Wayne, have we ever really heard about Patricia Wayne much in comic books or in TV shows before?
Not that I'm aware of.
So when all your main characters suddenly have a final destination moment and decide we're not going to get on board that plane for whatever reasons they all have, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in a second, but if all your main characters that you've been following for 2 seasons decide they're not going to board a plane just before it takes off, and you have a few minor characters about to take off, I absolutely expect that plane to blow up.
Yeah, well, I guess from my side, I actually thought that Gully was going to down the plane with a rocket launcher.
Or
something like that. Yeah. So that's what I thought was going to happen, or it was going to get caught up in sudden bombardment from the Raven Union or something like that. But it doesn't. It takes off and it goes off into the sky on its way to America.
On its way to Gotham, yes. Yeah, exactly. So we may see them later on if we do arrive in Gotham at some point at the end of Pennyworth. That's the first major point for the episode. Let's get on to the English League and Thomas. As we've been mentioning, Thomas a member of the CIA, not supposed to be working with the English League, but all the way throughout the season, he has got his connection through Martha, and through the connection with Aziz that he's had, connections to all the members of that team, even though he's supposed to be against them. Well, not against them, not supporting them. That's the other way around.
Yeah, and I guess as you were saying about where the stories coalesce, we have, we see Thomas at the airport with Patricia as he's sending Patricia off, because like Alfred, Thomas and Martha have decided not to board the plane, and the same for Lucius as well. And all this is coming about because of the data that Lucius has gotten on Stormcloud.
Yeah.
They've passed it over to the up through the chain of command in the CIA, but the US president is basically happy that they don't use this intel to try and prevent its use, to inform the English League that it will end the war quickly, and so are happy to let events take their turn.
And they can wash their hands of it and pretend they never knew anything about Stormcloud if it goes quickly. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Also liked the kind of 60s Bond video call that they have set up. It really feels like something that you'd see in it. I know there absolutely wasn't video calling back in the 60s, but you used to see it all the time in those types of shows.
It was really good.
Yeah.
And as a result, all the US personnel in the embassy are to leave and to return to America. Now, except for essential personnel. So all I can say is I hope I didn't, if I was working there, I hope I wasn't going to be designated as essential. So we know this awful weapon could be deployed, killing everyone. And well, you're staying because you're essential. Absolutely. I guess manning the telephone lines or making sure, security, front desk security.
Yep.
I guess at least they know they need gas masks.
Well, yeah.
So I guess they would be protected, but it was all under the radar.
Will the gas mask protect them? Once again, essential workers being thrown under the bus by the higher ups, as we see here. It is a really interesting idea, though. I like that this is kind of the cutting point for Thomas Wayne. We have Thomas and Lucius going off for a few drinks, and Lucius says to Thomas, we commented on this actually on last week's episode, that the relationship between Lucius and Thomas didn't seem like the kind of friendship you would have expected from the two of them, from the interactions we've seen in future stuff, I suppose. Here we see that it has now mended. It has now become a good relationship. Lucius says to Thomas, when I saw you first, I didn't like you at all. I felt you were a privileged man, but you've got this duality in you that I like, that I find interesting. You've got a different thing under the surface, effectively. And it speaks to his son. It speaks to Bruce Wayne, this duality that's going on, that one side, people absolutely hate, that billionaire playboy side, which is Thomas Wayne playing fast and loose with being a privileged man born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and this underground side that other people don't know about. So Lucius being let in there in Thomas's duality. So I thought that was a good call out.
Yeah, this was really good, and we get the first mention of Thomas wanting to do a medical degree as well.
Yay!
So it's all beginning to stack up as we understand this character of Thomas Wayne, which is really good.
And we did mention before, we were kind of going, he's not a CIA agent in the future, but it looks like he's there kind of going, I've pretty much burned my bridges here. If they find out it was me, which they probably will, because I'm the only person that has this information, I'm out. So I think I'm going to go off to medical school and get my medical degree.
And they share then the information that they have on Stormcloud, first of all with Martha, and Martha refuses to leave, but ultimately this is what brings back Martha, Thomas, Alfie, and brings in Lucius all together as this group, as they bring the secret footage of Stormcloud to Prime Minister Aziz, in the hope that they will force America to intervene and fight by their side if the English League are aware of this and inform the US about the weapon.
Yeah, exactly. They're just going to try and force America's hand to make sure that Americans know this is going on before the attack is the concept, isn't it? This idea that if they get this knowledge out there, the US can't refuse. They can't say that we didn't know about it effectively. So that's quite an interesting one. I know it's off screen as well. I like that the convincing from Martha to make Thomas and Lucius stay is done off screen, because you can kind of see Martha will not take no for an answer here. She's been fighting alongside the English League. She kind of goes, well, I'm not leaving, basically. And then the following morning, you find out that everybody's decided they're going to stay and fight alongside the English League. I kind of like that was kept off screen because you know Martha's character. You know she's this type of person that would be able to convince everybody to stay. So it's a nice touch.
Yeah, it really is. But moving on to the Raven Union and Bet Sykes, the interesting thing about how this connects with Stormcloud is that with the events of the last episode, Lord Harwood is now under house arrest at his family home, but he's being kept alive. And there's a really interesting conversation with Colonel John Salt, who is now the acting chancellor of the Raven Union. But he wants to keep Harwood alive so that all the orders he gives is in his name, so that he has this degree of separation from using Stormcloud. Because you can see that, you know, Salt's pet project, this awful chemical weapon he wants to use, even though that you can still hear from the army, from the field marshal, that they don't want to use this at all.
Yeah.
If the need to use it is there, it will be done basically by Lord Harwood, by proxy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of really interesting. But
yeah, I really like the explanation of that. You know, Salt's in leadership position because Harwood's alive. He'll execute his orders in his name effectively. But if he dies, then it goes to an election and they lose. He loses the leadership. Probably it's unlikely that it'll be Salt. It's more likely to be Field Marshal Wednesday, I think. Yeah, it's likely that he'll take over. He's kind of saying, my army have done everything here. You guys had the plans, but we don't need you anymore. It's really easy now to take over the rest of England. So I should be in charge, is what the Field Marshal's saying to him. But Salt's going, oh, hang on a second. We still need the support of the people. They're behind Harwood. We'll put him out there. We'll roll him out every time we have to do a press conference, effectively roll him out to say that he's still a leader. And at the moment, he's just getting over a flu, is how it's been announced on the news now. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But I love, I love all this, that, you know, people close to Harwood in the office who've kind of seen everything going on.
That poor
you know,
PA,
the PA contacts, the Sykes sisters. I love that when she, calls up, you have Sykes House of Pain, and you know, I guess the PA has no idea what type of shop it is, but she informs the Sykes sisters who go on a rescue mission, and I liked again how they brought the Sykes sisters back into the fray here. Yeah. In a sense, almost working in parallel with the, you know, the grouping of Thomas, Martha, Alfie, and Lucius, but just for different ends and with different people. Ultimately, whilst they managed to infiltrate Harwood's home, and I love the fight that they have. There's some great lines from Bess and Peggy as they infiltrate to rescue Lord Harwood. You know, Peggy goes, right, now go and get your toiletries and a fresh pair of underpants, and we've got to leave. But before they manage to get out, because, well, he dithered, as Peggy puts it, then they're surrounded by the army because the alarm has been raised. Yep. The only thing here was whether it's because of the medication that Harwood was on and maybe he's not taking it now. Yep. I'm not entirely sure how he had become so lucid and that he knew it was Colonel Salt all along, because he's not been in touch with Francis Gaunt. Yeah. He's the military have effectively put him under house arrest. He's not got good ties there. He mustn't have been in contact with Colonel Salt. So, okay, yes, maybe he's put all the pieces of the puzzle together in his head, but I just felt like, I guess it's shorthand for getting there, but again, it's a bit like with Gully. I was just like, you know, there's a leap there from Harwood. I thought if he was under house arrest, he would still be taking the medication. Why this change? Why and how has he gotten to the understanding that actually Salt is the one that has been planning this all along and has been undermining him and, you know, his close friends, Francis Gaunt and the Sykes sisters, you know? So yeah, it was just that leap of faith, I guess, a bit like with Gully, whereas it just didn't connect a little bit for me. But nonetheless, I love these three together.
They're great together. Absolutely.
Really liked it.
Yeah, I think it's not that much of a leap for Harwood. I think he is, when lucid, he is a very intelligent man. I really have seen that throughout the last season. I like the conversation between him and Beth and Peggy, because he's kind of going, well, I lost it a little bit. And Beth's kind of going, well, yeah, okay, everybody gets angry and kills people. You know, that's kind of Beth's modus operandi and has been. But she understands that he is a very smart person, and that occasionally his anger can go overboard, and he'll end off killing somebody. But I do think there is that medication that he's not taking. We don't see him take it once in this episode, and we've regularly seen, I think at least every episode we've had him taking one tablet at some point. So I think the tablets had something to do with it. We realized that earlier on in the season, but I think here, because he's not been forced to take them every day, he's kind of coming back to himself and realizing who benefits most from me being trapped in here. It's going to be John Salt, right? So
yeah, exactly. The other thing, I was surprised that maybe Kate wasn't with the Sykes as well, that she came along to help them out. I guess she's keeping the House of Horrors open for the S&M community in London. So yeah, I was interested that she wasn't sort of brought in on this. That would have been kind of quite good. But
I couldn't see her being brought in on the mission, but with the Sykes sisters, this is definitely a Sykes sisters type of deal. But the fact that it was so big a moment in the earlier episode when they finally got together, when Beth and Katie got together, Katie tells her, "This is it. No more violence. Nobody else gets hurt. Nobody else dies." And now Beth's on a mission where they've definitely beaten and hurt people quite badly. There was no moment at all where Kate was consulted about it, or a conversation there where Kate's wondering what's going on here, and Beth explains to her they have to do this, or anything like that. It does feel like that feels like a missed scene, a missed moment between them there as to why Kate would be okay at this, you know?
Yeah, that's true. But ultimately, they're surrounded. Harwood says that he will only deal with Salt. But then they kind of settle in for the evening to have a good old catch-up, it seems, which I thought was kind of nice. But the next day, there is the sacrifice of Harwood to allow Bet and Peggy to escape in order to get vital information to Francis Gaunt and to apologize on his behalf, because he knows that Salt had been manipulating them. But ultimately here, Harwood makes a stand, saying that the army need to put down their arms, otherwise they will be tried for treason. But Salt is there trying to tell the army not to kill him, not to fire. He needs this deniability. He needs Harwood to survive, but ultimately, Harwood, is shot and killed by the army as he draws his own weapon, against them and Salt. So yeah, this is the end of Harwood. He is cut down, at the front of his family home, but it is the sacrifice to allow the Sykes sisters to reach Francis Gaunt. So, interesting.
Yeah, it seems pretty definitive that this is the end of Harwood. It is the final scene of the episode. It is really important to Salt that Harwood stays alive. So you wonder, is there a way, that he isn't dead, from this scene? You wonder if he comes back next episode and he's all patched up, because it's really important to Salt being a very experimental scientist, possibly, being able to bring Harwood back. But it does make sense here that they would write Harwood out of the show, so that Salt is now in a really precarious position as the leader of the Raven Union. You'd hope that by the end, if this is the final episode of Pennyworth coming up, and there is the final battle to happen between the English League and the Raven Union, that the English League are going to persevere, because they have Alfie on their side, they have Thomas on their side. They're probably going to be the winners of this war, right?
Yeah, and maybe have the US on their side in the end. Maybe they will change their sort of backing, I guess, for this.
So you need to kind of destabilize the Raven Union and have them offside. So what I think, we're at the final part of the episode here. So what I think is the plan here is Peggy go and talk to Francis Gaunt, who has already made that connection with Prime Minister Aziz and already kind of dedicated that she wants to stop Stormcloud at all costs. I would say that's what we're going to get. We're going to get everybody on the same side, on the English League side, versus Salt and the Raven Union.
Yeah, they'll come together. Francis and the Sykes will be after Salt, certainly when they hear of Harwood's death.
Yeah.
And in doing so, there will be this meet-up with Thomas, Alfie, Lucius, and Martha as they're trying to stop Stormcloud.
Yeah.
And they will, their aims will come together, and they'll move forward, as one. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess it does feel then that we are moving into the final episode. Yeah. Doesn't.
Unless it's 3 episodes of war, which is
that is true.
Also entirely possible.
And it could, that is perfectly possible. Yeah. A lot of things happen. But certainly, this feels like it's all coming together quite nicely. Yeah. Just quickly as well on Harwood, we do get to see his stubby nose again as his metal prosthetic, I guess, falls off as he's trying to sit underneath his childhood tree.
Yeah, yeah.
Chestnut tree.
Not just metal, John. It's a gold prosthetic. Yeah. Of course, it is Harwood. Have to absolutely give a huge shout out, I suppose, to Jason Fleming and his performance throughout this series. He's been so central to the show, and his maniacal side all the way throughout the series has really felt like the comic book villain, building up, that Penguin in Gotham or Riddler in Gotham, that kind of character who came from nothing, or came from major privilege in this show, but came from being, a very simple character to being this really complex villain towards the end of the series. I really like that. Him getting a final moment here, and this powerful moment where he's standing with, effectively in front of an execution squad, which used to be his army, and now no longer is. I thought it was a really effective way of saying goodbye to the Harwood character. I thought it was really good.
Definitely.
Any notes or quotes from the episode, John?
No, none from me. As I say, the only quotes I had was, bring your toiletries and a fresh pair of underpants. It's just the delivery from Peggy is really good. Yeah. And then it is the classic, I just remember it as a child, the classic, we've missed our boat, if you hadn't dithered, I've not heard the word dithered for a while, would be in better shape for escaping effectively.
Exactly. And it's from the same scene as well. I love the banter again between Bet and Peggy about that, where Bet's pointing out, you were nagging him. That's why we're delayed. And Peggy going, I wasn't nagging. And I was just pointing things out. Yeah. And Bet saying that's the nature of nagging. It's just constantly pointing things out. Yeah, exactly. So you can tell, again, the sisters have a really good banter between the two of them. I like that they've had this scene in the episode. That was really good. Yeah. This could be the start of a beautiful friendship.
No, it won't.
I just absolutely love that they take the main Casablanca line and turn it into Alfie going, I
don't think so.
That's it for our discussion about Pennyworth, episode 7 of season 2, The Bloody Mary. John, overall, how would you rate this episode?
I would give this 3.5 fresh pair of underpants out of 5. They brought everyone together. There were a few things around Gully and with Harwood where the leaps of faith. I could see, absolutely how they could get there. I just wanted it spelt out more. Yeah. I think, this was bringing all the different characters together for that final, push on the Raven Union and to disrupt Salt. So, I thought that was really, really good. I think, maybe it was a little rushed. I guess if they hadn't had COVID, it could have just been done across a couple of episodes. There could have been more with Gully and Melanie and Alfie. I just think that fight scene just showed the intensity there, and that could have just spilt out really sort of well into other scenes, between Alfie and Gully. And I guess we'll still get that, but it's difficult to know how, if they're off to Raven Union headquarters to stop Stormcloud, because otherwise Gully's just going to be there, maybe with the Raven Union. I don't know. But so I guess under normal times, this may have played out over a couple of episodes, or at least some of the bigger plot lines.
Potentially, yeah.
So, but
because we do know from one of the other shows we covered from WandaVision, we do know how the COVID restrictions can seriously affect a show if you've been on a break for a few months. You know, as I said, the scene that I was expecting to see in the episode, given the build up, is just that Katie Beth interaction as to why Katie would think it's okay for Beth to go out on a violent mission, and potentially that's just because the actress couldn't come back.
Yeah, exactly.
That did happen in many shows.
So overall, it was a really. I thought it was a good episode for me. I think, as I say, I think Gully and Melanie, I thought that was really well done. Yeah. Very disturbing, raw, tough to watch. I loved Bette Sykes and Peggy Sykes coming in to rescue Harwood. I'm glad they got back together as well. And just everyone coming back together, because they've kind of been separated out this season, for the most part, I think was just really, really good. So 3.5 fresh pair of underpants out of 5.
Excellent. That's pretty good. That's pretty good for this type of episode. I totally get
it's
that.
a recommend.
Good recommendation. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it for our discussion about Pennyworth. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet and you want to hear the other stuff that we covered, you can always go over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com. Subscribe to the podcast there, or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. We are currently covering Falcon and the Winter Soldier on Disney Plus, which started on Friday, March 19th. Our first episode is out and available right now as we go in depth into the new Marvel Disney show. We just recently covered WandaVision as well. As I mentioned, we have every episode of that show on there too. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast over there. We'd love to hear your thoughts about Pennyworth as the season comes to a close. We'd love to hear any thoughts you have about the show. You can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. With any thoughts you have, or you can pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV Podcast Industries.
Absolutely. We will return with Pennyworth Season 2, Episode 8, The Hangman's Noose, which will be out next week. We hope you'll return to join us as well, and join us for our podcasts covering the other shows, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and of course WandaVision, if you haven't already seen it, because it'd be great to have you over on TV Podcast Industries for the shows that we're covering.
Absolutely. One last thing then, before we head out of the DC world. Once again, we did mention earlier on, big moment for DC this week as Zack Snyder's Justice League finally got released on HBO Max and Sky Cinema in the UK. Not going to go into major spoilers for this because, the movie came out a couple of years ago, but this is Zack Snyder's definitive version of the Justice League. His version, I suppose.
Just
the one
under 4 hours.
Just over 4 hours, yeah. 9 parts, 10 parts in the movie. So we'll just quickly talk about our thoughts about what we thought of the movie. We have already reviewed the original Justice League, Joss Whedon's Justice League, as it's kind of now being called. We kind of enjoyed that. We had a bit of fun in the cinema watching that. Right?
Yeah, it was fine. It
wasn't the greatest movie in the world, and considering the cast, considering we had 6 major heroes from the DC universe coming together, it's kind of sad that it wasn't this massive moment for the Justice League. But what did you think of this Zack Snyder version, John?
I really, really enjoyed it. We took our time watching it. It is 4 hours, and I just thought it was really, really good. I loved the additional storyline. I thought the whole battle sequence at the end with Steppenwolf was just so much better done than the original. And it was great to see Cyborg given more screen time, just because he's absolutely central to the mother boxes and really plays an important part in that final scene. I think it was great that they didn't have the family in the toxic part of Russia where Steppenwolf had set up their base to bring the mother boxes together. Yeah. So I thought this was it just made more sense actually, for me. And,
it's hard not to compare
it. Was great.
Yeah, it's hard not to compare it to Joss Whedon's Justice League because fundamentally it's the same rough storyline, but it's amazing to think how much was added here, how much context was added. I never felt confused by the motivations of the bad guys in this, and never felt confused by why a team like the Justice League would need to come together to fight this guy. It felt so much more cohesive as a movie, so much more enjoyable as a movie. Now, that said, I know after watching a 4-hour piece of work, I absolutely know if you wanted to get this in the cinema 5 years ago or 4 years ago, there are things you could edit out. And after watching this now and thinking back on the Joss Whedon version of this, or the Warner Brothers version of this, let's say, you can see how easy they go, okay, well, we need to shorten this movie down by 2 hours. If we take out everything about Cyborg from this movie, that's going to, by cutting off all the extra storylines to that and just introducing the character, that's going to save us 2.5 hours. Grand. Let's remove that out of there and just tie everything else together. But by taking out Cyborg, and for the most part from the movie, you've pulled the heart out of it.
Yeah,
like, that's what it feels like. There's moments in this movie with Ray Fisher's Cyborg which are really good. Like, there's so much that his character does to mark himself as a reasonable character to be part of the Justice League. You know, in the original version, it feels like there's a guy over there with the power to control computers. Let's stick him in the Justice League. Whereas it feels like each person gets their moment in this movie where they are justified as a hero that can be part of this central six superheroes.
It's the weird choice, isn't it? Because as you say, he is the linchpin, Cyborg, for dealing with the mother boxes.
Yeah.
And to have cut out that, I know you're having to introduce the character within this film as well, and to, you know, pardon pun, flesh him out. Yeah. But then for me, that needed to be done in the editing that was done originally. And, you know, ultimately you can play much better with shorthand with the established characters from the previous movies of Man of Steel, of Batman v Superman, and with Gal Gadot, with Wonder Woman, because they've already been introduced. For me, the three characters that you're introducing in this movie were Aquaman, the Flash, and Cyborg. And they needed the time, because even the Flash's the time travel element made much more sense here as well. And I loved the Flash in the first edit, effectively, of Justice League. So
he was a fun throwaway character. That's the thing. In the original version, it felt like there's the guy with the funny lines. Give him more funny lines. Here, you actually do get a story arc for him. And if you're doing a movie like this, it feels like give each one of them a story arc. Why wouldn't you? Because that's why you have 6 characters there. You might as well cut one of them out if you're not going to give them a story arc. And so it felt more balanced in that way.
And I felt as well it was, you know, seeing the ancient battles with about trying to prevent the unity of the mother boxes with the gods of ancient Greece, like the Atlanteans, Zeus, all these different characters, and the Amazonians as well, that are that constant here. And then, you know, equating it, I felt that link to then the superheroes. It made a lot of sense here. And I liked how got more of that flavor of how Steppenwolf despises the Amazonians with Gal Gadot, and that felt like a kind of a nice sub arc through this as well, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. The way we watched it, I think, it makes so much more sense as well. You don't get this type of budget on a miniseries on TV. You just don't. You get some great miniseries, 4 or 5 episodes of a show that you binge watch, and that's how we watch this. The idea of having those chapter breaks that Zack Snyder put in, where he put in 8 chapter breaks, an epilogue and a prologue. So you can actually just go watch it to whatever break you want to. We broke off and made dinner in between one half and the other half. And it felt like it was easily able to be followed. Like, you know, there's no way they would have made this as a miniseries with that budget a couple of years ago, but you can with these 4 hours. And that's something we'd regularly watch, would be binging 4 hours of TV show. We actually just did it with Drive to Survive, the Formula One documentary. That's about 5 hours long, effectively, and we binged that all in a day as well. So it's not unheard of. So it doesn't feel overly long when you have those kind of breaks where you can go, right, Grant, let's walk out. But I can't imagine sitting in the cinema for that 4 hours watching the whole thing without seeing it before. So like with Lord of the Rings, when those extended cuts came out, you watch it in the cinema because you've seen it before and you know how good it is, so you can go and watch that. But I can't imagine having not seen this before going to the cinema for the 4 hour cut. So I can totally understand the business idea from Warner Brothers of cutting it down.
Absolutely.
But they absolutely ruined this movie by doing it the way they did.
I believe that they could have edited the 2.5 hour theatrical release, or however long it was, much better. I think it's possible, because there is so much material there. And as I say, I think, given what the story was and how this final battle happens and plays out and comes together through the course of the movie, then I think that to me should have been preserved, for sure. And so I think it could have been edited differently to preserve that.
It's just even in that final battle, as you say, everybody getting their moment. It feels like everybody using their powers combined. And that's what you do. That's what they did in the Avengers. Every single character gets their moment to shine, effectively. That's what they do in the cartoons. That's what they do in the comic books. Everybody's powers are required to beat this massive threat. So you have to have that. And they didn't have it in the original Justice League, or didn't feel like it. Didn't feel earned. It didn't feel like it was there. So overall, absolutely recommend.
Absolutely.
Justice League, watch it.
Definitely.
Take your time with it. Treat it like it's a show you can watch weekly. Watch an hour of it every week until you've finished it. If the 4 hour runtime is daunting, it's perfectly built so you can watch it over the course of a few days, which I loved. I really thought that was a good choice. That was a little more spoilery than I thought it was going to be, but that's okay. I think most people have watched it. It seems to have been watched by a lot of people out there. Thanks so much once again for joining us on the Pennyworth podcast from TV Podcast Industry. We'll be back next week with episode 8 of season 2 of Pennyworth, The Hangman's Noose. And as we mentioned, we're also covering Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We'll be back with episode 2 of that over on our main feed on TV Podcast Industries.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us, fellow governors and Gothamites. We'll speak with you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
You know, Alfred, I think this could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
I doubt it. You never know, do you?